Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Now we get that.
Okay. So what they've done is a lot of places. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Is that just? I'll turn my
Hear
volume.
that too. And
Yeah, it must be.
All right. So a lot of levels of government, they've created barriers to making ballot initiatives, so they can't be overruled, and some of those are pretty serious. So I'm calling from Colorado, and for instance, we have 64 counties here, and 60 of those 64 counties do not have ballot initiatives, and that's one of the things I've been working on. And it's very difficult because the two cartel parties are not interested in losing control. And this would be a means to circumvent their control.
Mhm.
Now, I'll pass the baton.
Yeah. And so I threw out the question for those who just joined us. Oh, I don't know if me.
Michael,
Yeah.
there's a lot of feedback. Maybe people who aren't talking need to mute.
Yeah. Why don't we?
playing through speakers, Michael, you're probably picking it up somehow.
Yeah. I want to mute and let's mute.
Maybe just the speaker and everybody else on mute.
Yeah, and then when you want to talk, just either physically raise your hand or click the reactions. Okay, we've okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so those who just joined us.
Oh, still there. That
let me just use the control. Okay, I think we got it. They just had a mute. So for those who just joined us, I threw out the question. I was talking about the Supreme Court rulings, the January 6th public hearings, and January 6th public hearings committee, the House committee, pretty much has shown there was a coup attempt, and that I talked about what I had written in the essay called "The Revolution Was Not Televised," that there's been a slow coup going on for the last 40 years. But I said how the Supreme Court has, in a way, inadvertently showed us that the way forward is direct democracy. So I then put out the question that Jesse was kind enough to answer, and anyone else would like to answer, and the question being, when the term direct democracy, what that might mean to you. So if anyone would like to say anything, feel free to either unmute yourself or raise your hand.
I'll speak up.
Okay, great, John.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Well, you are muted again. Let me just have to unmute.
Button there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I don't hear myself, but I can go with that. Yeah, I mean, Jesse's right. The direct democracy ballot initiatives, and on the local level, you can have some direct democracy. On the national level, not it just doesn't exist. On the state level, it exists. But the question to me is a tricky one, because it infers that we have a different political system than the one we have. Somehow I find it to be a little evasive of the real problem, which is that what we're looking for is better representation in a democracy. That's the key. And Jesse's involved in proportional representation, trying state by state to initiate proportional representation, because that definitely would lead to much better representation. And I myself have been advocating the entire replacement of our current national constitution for reasons like this, that the current political system is just anti-democratic in nature, and that's the problem. So the answer to your question is, I love direct democracy. It's not going to happen under this political system. The whole system needs to be tossed out and replaced with a better one.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. There's
Mhm.
there's such impediments to democracy in the United States. And
Yeah.
I have a quote from, I don't know if you know of the man, John Sanford Levinson. Do you know his
Yeah.
name?
Yeah, he
Yes.
was on my last podcast.
Oh, okay. So you're probably talking these topics, but Sanford Levinson has a quote that a substantial responsibility for the defects of our polity lies in the Constitution itself. So, and I would say the biggest part of it, well, a major part of it is the United States Senate of and by itself. It's the saying about the Senate is where good legislation goes to die. The majority of the people are, the majority of the American people are pro-choice. Let's see, I wrote down a few things. Pro-choice, support climate change legislation and the transition to renewable energy, stronger gun control laws, want universal health care, a higher minimum wage, subsidized childcare, guaranteed paid sick leave, higher taxes on the wealthy, affordable colleges, a more fair society. I mean, some of these things that I was just listing, that the more economic parts were a good part of the Build Back Better bill, and there was all this excitement, oh, it's going to pass through, all this machinations of the budget reconciliation through the Senate, and then one man put his thumb on it, killed it. Of course, no Republicans were for it. And so the closest thing the United States had to New Deal style legislation died because of the United States Senate. And yeah, so John, answering also talking about, and Jesse talking about proportional representation, the United States is far from that. And actually, of all the democracies in the world that have two houses, bicameral Congress, bicameral Parliament, and generally it's the bicameral, the two houses are an upper chamber and a lower chamber. Most have, or the great majority are, I think just the United States has a powerful upper chamber, which the Senate is, where the other parliaments and legislatures, the lower house, the lower chamber has more of the power, more of the ability to set legislation. I mean, and then and then in the United States Congress, the House is the so-called People's Chamber, the People's House. But then there's so much gerrymandering going on that democracy is also wobbling thanks to what's going on in the House. So yeah,
it's a mess.
It's a mess. Jane, I'll turn it over to you. You just have to unmute.
Yeah, to follow up what you were saying, most other democracies also have multi-party systems. And they have to form coalition governments, and on different issues, like they don't always work together. The same parties don't always work together on the same issues, but there's lots of, cross-party interaction. I was speaking to a woman from the Netherlands when I was in Europe 5 years ago, right after Trump got elected, and she was asking me what was wrong with people in our country. But she brought up the whole difference between the two-party system here, and she said they have 14 parties in their parliament for a tiny little country like that. And she said several of them have one representative, but everybody's voice, people feel like their voices are heard that way.
Yeah, That's you hit the nail on the head with another big problem in the United States, Jane.
So I just think I think our democracy was, I think our democracy was an interesting experiment and it has failed. And it's like, yeah, it's time to totally reorganize it. But I don't know how we get the energy, energy to
Yeah, Jesse, you had,
enough
yeah.
people.
Jesse, I'll let you reply.
You, okay. So the real big difference is that we use single member districts. And when you only have single member districts, only one point of view can be represented usually. Both parties are saying that there's a large tent, but that's not really true. It's generally one faction within one of the two parties that control things. And the solution to this is what we talked about before, which is proportional representation. And all of those systems have multi-member districts. The more members you have per districts, the greater the diversity can be represented. So for instance, Denmark has 13.5 members average in 10 districts. Same size is Colorado. Colorado has 5.8 million people. Denmark, it has about the same. And they have a 2% threshold in order for a party to get elected, and 13.5 members per district. So when you design a system for diversity, then you can achieve that. And if you design a system to exclude people and concentrate power, that's what you get. So you can design a system for any range of number of parties, and you can design it for one party, or you can design it like the Netherlands for 14 parties. The lower the threshold, the more parties you're going to have. So Denmark has a 2% threshold. We have 50% threshold. And that's at the root of the problem. The two cartel parties aren't interested in sharing power. So they want to keep that system in place. And the only way you get around that really is through the initiative process with direct democracy. So I'll turn over back to Michael.
Oh, that was great, Jesse. Yeah, it's and Jane, do you have anything you want to add to Jesse, or? Yeah. So Jesse, you make such a good point about multi-member districts. That's another big thing that other countries have. Ranked choice voting, another thing.
Don't use that word.
Oh, why is that?
Well, because that's a popular term from Fair Vote, and it's a single member district system when you say that. And the multi-member district system with a ranking is called single transferable vote.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's important to use precise language.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
I think the United States has had over its history, 200 and almost 50 years, has had two constitutions. The original Articles of Confederation, written in 1776, and then the United States Constitution, written in 1787. And actually, I believe in 1776, also the state of Pennsylvania wrote a constitution for their state that was much more egalitarian. It set term limits. It had elections every year, and it gave everybody the right to vote. And it really was a true government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And when the framers of the U.S. Constitution got together, they looked at what Pennsylvania did and said, that's not what we want. And besides Pennsylvania and a few other states, there were no other democracies, constitutions in the world, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, in France, there was a lot of there was a revolution soon to come, and so these were the first of a whole new movement, writing constitutions, born of the ideas out of the Enlightenment. And the only place the United States and the framers had to look at, and they did have them people from the Iroquois Nation who came and consulted also, and they're actually the oldest democracy in the world since around, I think, the 12th or 13th century, and their system of governance is on consensus. And but James Madison famously had this fear of what he called the tyranny of the majority, which was really just aristocratic scorn on his part, because he's considered the father of the Constitution, but instead he created the tyranny of the minority that we live here under in the United States. And I think, then on top of what Jane and Jesse were saying, I think other countries have looked at the United States and their Constitution and looked at it and said, that's not what we want. We want it to be represented more pluralistic, more representative of all the people. And so they've had things like, multi-parties have been the way it's worked, and multi-member districts, and just ways where coalition governments generally are formed instead of this. I like the word Jesse used, cartel. I know the term duopoly, the two-party duopoly that we have in the United States, and it really just is not designed. It's a major design flaw. It's not designed to hear the voice of the people in any such way. So, people like John and Jesse who are working at more representative democracy or trying to rewrite the Constitution, it's really, that's where we need to go, is just, look at the other countries, what they're doing. And I think I have some statistic. I don't know if I can find it that easy. Oh, here it is. Let's see. Since the United States Constitution was written in 1787, there have been 2,200 constitutions written around the world, which is an average of 15 constitutions per nation, or roughly one constitution per nation every 15 years, where, by contrast, the United States had two constitutions, the Articles of Confederation, written in 1776 and lasting 11 years, and then the current Constitution, which is 235 years and counting. And interestingly enough, Thomas Jefferson, who was not in the country when the Constitution was written, had a differing belief about the Constitution, besides the fact that he was much more had a revolutionary fervor and much more believed in egalitarian rights. But he believed that the Constitution needed to be rewritten every generation. That one, let's see if I have the quote, that
I think it was every 19 years.
Every 19 years. Well, he said he believed that a Constitution should be rewritten every generation. So in those times of 19 years, and that a Constitution that endures over time preferences the generation that wrote it. And he wrote to James Madison and said, "The earth belongs to the living. The dead have neither powers nor rights over it. No society can make a perpetual constitution." James Madison believed the opposite, and Madison's way is one. But I mean, it's true. You hear like all these on the Supreme Court, especially now, the supermajority, they're all what they call originalists or textualists. And it's like, there's no difference between the Constitution and the Bible, the Christian Bible. They're both like documents that are sacred. And in fact, for those who watched the January 6th hearings, if you remember when Rusty Bowers gave public testimony, he's the Arizona Speaker of the House, and he talked about the threats he's had, and he would not give in to the pressure put on him to push the electors over to Trump. But he said, I heard him say, "Oh God, I don't know if this is this is the kind of guy you want on your side, but he said, oh, I believe the Constitution was handed down by
Oh,
God or the
yeah.
writer.
I remember that, yeah.
I recorded that.
Yeah. Oh, so you can
So
hear it again and again.
a question.
Yeah.
Well, the source for the 2200s or Constitution is written, so I could post that.
Yeah, that comes from John. Do you know Bo Breslin?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bo, I did an interview with him. Bo Breslin, who's a constitutional scholar, wrote a book, A Constitution for the Living. I think that's the name of it. And I could probably find the page where it's from, but if I had more time to look it up, I have the notes on my phone.
Mhm, mhm.
But that's it was actually I think may have been in the preface of the book. That's where he said it, wrote it. But that's public knowledge too. It's not just Bo Breslin who came up with that.
Yeah.
So there's yeah, so there's these originalists, textualists, and a lot of them do have, kind of fundamentalists. I mean, it's really fundamentalist thinking, whether it's the Bible or the Constitution. And it just is like written in stone, handed down from, God.
Yes.
Whether the 10 Commandments and the 10 Amendments.
Well, yeah, are we live? I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an odd thing that we have this reverence for our Constitution. I've done 14 episodes now of my podcast, and it's come up at least 3 times that I can remember offhand. That Americans are very innovative, except for when it comes to their political systems. And I think the reason behind it is that the instability in 1787 was, more than palpable. We could have lost the country back to the Brits. And if we hadn't reorganized the national constitution to make a strong government. And, if you're going to have an army, you're going to have corporations who can perform the kind of work that needs to be done in an expedient way to create the ships and the armies and the artillery, all that stuff that you need for the military. And that's ultimately what makes a strong power. And the corporations, as well as an economic power. So I think they were given sort of priority. The priority in the Constitution is the individual accumulation of wealth, and corporations represent that paradigm. And that's the shift that we need to make. And in order to make that shift, we need a different political system that prioritizes the well-being of the planet and the people on it. And, so we need to figure out how to organize for a new constitution. And in order to do that, I think there are several basic steps. One is, know your history, know your power, and use it. But you also, it comes down to understanding the basic history behind our framing, that constitutional period, and what the intentions were. I think they meant to create a democracy, but a very limited one for a democracy for the aristocracy, basically. And then we have to understand how political systems work, on a comparative basis. And we covered that in, I think it was episode 5 of my podcast with Stephen Taylor on how our Constitution compares to other constitutions around the world. And I've looked at several of them in detail. There's some glaring differences. Ours is most definitely an 18th century, throwback when you look at the rest of what other nations use for a political system, which is designed to represent the people. Right now, we have a system where our politicians are picking the voters, not the voters picking the politicians. So it's all of it's got to go, in my view, the sooner the better. And I think, the idea is to organize around the principle that basically it's our most fundamental democratic right to control our constitutions of government. And we need to do it peacefully and in an informed way. And we need to do it in an urgent matter, because we're running out of time very quickly.
Mhm. John, so could you, because you've sent me some links to the website where you've been doing some work about the Constitution. Could you share what you've been doing with other people? With everyone?
And I'm not going to take long because I'm really interested in hearing from everybody who's here today to get a sense of, who you are and what's going on with you. So quickly, I have a couple of websites. I'm also a musician, and I have a website called peoplescongress.co that I think
Could-
got
Is it easy to put
hacked.
is it easy to put the link in the chat box? Do you have it?
Yeah, I can do that for you.
Yeah, somewhere along.
And and then the other one is probably more germane to this discussion, which is the Peaceful Political Revolution in America podcast. That's the one that I'm working on now. The former website kind of lays out the argument for creating a new constitution. There's several pages, and there's a couple of models on that website. One is the one that Sanford Levinson produced with their group. And the other one is one that I've been working on over the last 10 years, just to kind of flush out my thoughts about what it should be like. And then the podcast starts with a couple of episodes about Thomas Paine, because he was basically the person that started the revolution in 1776. He galvanized everybody with a common sense, his book Common Sense. And those ideas led to the revolution. And then we have the framing. So we talk about the framers and who they really were and what was going on. And then we talk about comparative democracies with Aaron Lippert, who is probably the premier scholar on comparative democracies in the world. He's now retired, but I've made friendships with him over the last year or last 5 years. And so I talked with Aaron in episode 4 and his associate, Stephen Taylor, about comparative democracy. So you get an idea of how ours compares to other countries. And then people like Paul Street and Dan Lazar, and then I just finished up a conversation with Sanford Levinson and Richard Wolff, and the most recent one, which I did last week, was with George William Van Cleve, who is a scholar at Georgetown Law, and he wrote a book called Making a New American Constitution. So there's more to come. But if you listen to those in sequence, it pretty much spells out the whole reason why and how we can make a new constitution.
Mhm.
Yeah, and these are people who know a lot more about it than I do, but yeah, they all seem to agree in general on what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, so if you somewhere along our discussion group tonight, if you can get
Get
put
some of those in there
the
now.
links in there. Yeah. So which since you mentioned Richard Wolff, kind of Richard Wolff is a well-known economist, a Marxist economist, socialist economist. And as Richard Wolff talks, he went to Yale School of Economy or whatever, but he had some well-known economists who were his friends and classmates, including Janet Yellen and some others. But I bring him up because there's two parts to this discussion. One is what we've been talking about. Great, thank you, John.
Mhm.
And I clicked, anyone feel free to click on it so you can go right there.
Yeah.
So one part is political democracy, what we've been talking about, and the fact, and as we've been talking about, the Constitution that just is a big blockade to political democracy. And the second part is economic democracy, and the ideas of people like Richard Wolff and many others representing that. And it's the political democracy and the economic democracy are tied in together very inherently. In fact, there's a famous quote from, and I'm probably only going to be able to paraphrase it, but there's a famous quote from the the Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis from the early part of the 20th century. And his quote is, we can either have in America democracy or great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few people, but we can't have both. And that's the problem too. And how our Constitution, the Constitution doesn't say let's concentrate wealth, but the way it's framed, the way Congress is set up, the way our whole government is set up, the indirect democracy that the United States has is perfectly set up for plutocracy and oligarchy of the government by the wealthy. And that's what we have. And that's, creating the biggest problems in the United States, tied in with our economic system of a capitalism gone haywire. And every problem we face, the will of the majority being subjugated, along with climate change and healthcare system, pandemics, everything can be traced to this interrelatedness between political democracy and economic democracy. And as the January 6th hearings have shown, and many people are seeing it and talking about it, is this minority of people who are just insurrectionists, who are just going crazy about what they see is going on, and are just even though a lot of these people have been hurt by the economic undemocracy of America.
Yeah, they don't get it.
And it's yeah, and it's creating such problems. And that goes back to John, I think you were saying, democracy, and are talking about democracy. And one of the things we see is this debate about, is not mostly among right-wing people, they will say the United States is not a democracy, it's a republic. And perhaps some or all of you have come across that conversation. And it's actually something that the pushing that the United States is a republic, because, and it's true, the United States is a democratic republic, and Madison and Alexander Hamilton, in writing the Federalist Papers, use the terms interchangeably. But the idea that the United States is a republic and what that means to the right wing is something that's been pushed for the longest time by the John Birch Society, the ultra right wing organization that's kind of having a renaissance in popularity. John, did you?
Yeah, one thing about that is that you mentioned the Senate earlier, and during the ratification, the states ratified the Constitution in pairs. One half of the pair was a free state, and the other half was a slave state. And the reason behind that is because the slave states wanted protection in the South from the North. They didn't want anybody telling them to, give up their slaves. And so they insisted on having parity in the Senate. So as the ratification went forward, pairs of states would go in tandem with each other, so that 50-50 split in the Senate would remain there. And that, I think, is the origin of how this oligarchic tradition in America took root in this country. It was there to protect the slavocracy. And that was, a monopoly interest. The free farmers and the free industrialists in the North were scared to death of them, because obviously it's very difficult to compete with, corporations that had free labor. And, ultimately the Civil War was fought over it because it was unfair to the free farmers and the free capitalists in the North. It wasn't so much about, human dignity. It was about economic parity.
Mhm.
And, when I started to realize what that was all about, I was like, wow, so this is really getting deep here, because, it's not about, fundamental values. This is all about survival and how people are going to, have security in their lives, basically, So forgot what it was that you said that reminded me about that, but I hope that that kind of followed what you were saying, because I can't remember what it was that you said.
Well, I brought up the concept of that the United States
Oh, yeah.
public.
Yeah, and there you go. That goes back to the states' rights thing.
Hmm.
It's like the states, no, it's all about states' rights in this country. You can't tell states what to do. Yeah, that's because the states want to be left alone. And that's because our history was the southern states definitely wanted to be left alone. And that's the residue that we have today. And this, you see it in West Virginia. And now the split is more urban and rural than it is north and south. But that same split has kind of grafted on into our contemporary society, and it's become sort of a way of claiming some kind of protection from the rest of the country, as if, you're not really part of the country. But and George Van Cleve in the last episode was saying, states are old inventions. They don't even, there's just like, are they even legitimate entities anymore? Half of them can't survive without being in the country. So, it's like an argument that's just full of holes. And I think that we have to recognize that, no, it's not that we're here as 50 sovereign states like it was under the Articles of Confederation. Those were sovereign states at the time, but now we're basically one nation, with really autonomous regions, semi-autonomous regions that all are governed under the national constitution. We're one people. Yeah.
Yeah. Or no, and adding on to what you said, John, it serves, the people who promote states' rights, which has always been a code word for racism and goes back to the slavery days.
Yeah.
They want states' rights when it serves them, and they want, when it serves them, like we want to dictate the laws of abortion or choice or other things, or back then slavery. And then when it doesn't serve them to have state rights, then they want the federal government to do something.
Right.
So yeah, but to finish what I was saying about republic, what's happened is that in this right wing thinking, republic is akin to the term which you probably hear, illiberal democracy. So in this version of republic, what's happened is that the people promoting this idea, they don't like the majority's way of seeing it. They think that the majority are a bunch of elitists, they're a bunch of pansies, or they're people who are out there and don't know what's right, don't have any virtues or morals. And so the minority that believes in, the minority of the population that believes that the United States is a republic, see that it's the minority that should be ruling, that we need moral, virtuous Christian people and not this diverse country with all kinds of people and desires and choices. And our nation is falling away from being the Christian nation. I'm just saying this, it's not my opinion. So just to clarify that the nation is falling away from its Christian founding. And then, so they're getting hope, they're being fed by the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court is going their way. So that's why, like, the far right, or maybe it's just the Republican Party in general, well, there are a few exceptions, look to a country like Hungary and Viktor Orban, the president, as the role model. And that's why the recent Conservative Political Action Conference was held in Budapest in Hungary, and why Orban is going to be a keynote speaker at their upcoming conference, another conference in August in Texas. And Orban said recently something like, it's not good that Europeans are mixing with non-Europeans, and that's not what we will allow in Hungary. We don't want, and he's meaning like race and breeding, not breeding, I mean sex or children. He said to Hungary is Orban wants Hungary to be a country of the pure, and that's what the Republicans look up to. And, you know, that's why they all love Putin too, another person of the same ilk. So that's this whole movement towards illiberal democracy, and why the term republic gets pushed. And that was that famous quote from the Republican senator from Utah, Mike Lee, that came, I think, last year or the year before. He posted on Twitter something like, the people don't, democracy is not what we want prosperity, and rank democracy will thwart that. So there's this whole anti-democratic movement going on. And that's why, like, Fox News, like the last January 6th hearing, they didn't telecast it, and instead they had Tucker Carlson ranting about his whatever he rants about. And you know, why this story, this narrative is going on still about, oh, they were just patriots storming the Capitol. And you know, and again, it all ties back to how this country's constitution was designed, the flaw in the Constitution, and where we need to change things. And that's why I've come to, you know, realization that you know, we need to have some form of direct democracy integrated with indirect democracy. We can't have the country be total chaos and everything goes up for a vote for every person for everything. But if we don't rewrite the Constitution and start making it for the modern age, and adding what things we're talking about, like multi-parties and multi-members and proportional representation, you know, we're screwed. And especially when we have the existential crises of things like climate change. And I don't even know why people say existential crisis anymore, because it's a real crisis. Or just and the other big problem is the wealth inequality. You know, that ties in with the economic democracy, or the lack of economic democracy in this country. And they, again, all tie together. So Jesse, when you were talking before, when we had the feedback issue, you were talking about your what you're doing with proportional representation. Could you say more, and the organization you are involved with?
An invite to plug my organization.
Oh, please. If you have a link, you know, put that in.
So bestdemocracy.org. And I've been looking at this for a while. So there are 4 variations of proportional representation used by 94 countries in the world. Over the last 101 years, every system that's been adopted worldwide has been proportional. All new democracies, not a single country has copied what we have. They all look at it and see a pile of garbage, okay? And the only reason why we still have it, in my mind, is because the 2 cartel parties are protecting it. They use a wall of obstructions to prevent change. And they're the gatekeepers of change. So in most states, you don't have ballot initiatives. Only 18 states have ballot initiatives to change the constitution of the state. You have to go through the cartel. I call it a cartel because duopoly is too nice. And you need to get people's attention. We need to shake people out of their lethargy, and we have essentially a cartel is in any industry where you just have a few players that control the entire industry. And the defining characteristic is that they collude to exclude competition. So you have these 2 cartel parties that have controlled every election in every state and federal government since 1860. And they prevent other parties by entering by using an electoral system that is subject to what's called Duverger's law. And Duverger's law basically says that any electoral system with a plurality system, plurality requiring one or the other party to achieve a majority of the votes, is going to lead to a two-party system. So it's a little bit unusual that Canada and the UK have more than two parties, but two of those parties are marginalized in most countries. So
You should add, Jesse, that proportional representation will do two things, and that is, confirmed by my guest Aaron Lippard in episode 4, who I remind you is like with the leading expert on comparative democracies in the world. So he's probably right about this. The proportional representation will end a two-party system instantly.
it'll blow it up.
It'll blow it up.
Yes.
And gerrymandering would be impossible.
It would be impossible. You can't draw any multi-member district that is more than, say, 5 members per district and gerrymander it. Yeah. And so I've been looking at these different proportional systems. There are basically 4 types of systems. There are 2-party list systems. One's called a closed party list. Closed party list is where the party itself controls the order of the list, who's going to be elected based on their order. An open party list allows voters to change the order of the list. So if your favorite candidate from a particular party is listed number 3, you can change the list and move them from number 3 up to number 1. So most of the best systems use open party lists with a very low threshold, 4% or so. And there's single transferable vote, which is ranking without, oftentimes you can do it without parties involved. Usually I like single transferable vote, but you need a lot of people in a district in order to be able to represent every district accurately. So a good example of that, systems like Gothenburg, Sweden, where you have 81 members for a city council, and they have 10 parties in that city council. So that single transferable vote is a little bit complicated to explain the counting mechanism. So if you go to the Best Democracy website, bestdemocracy.org, and go to proportional representation down to single transferable vote, there's a 3-minute video that explains it really well. So you can get the concept of how counting is done. I don't like to get too involved in math and counting because I start losing people, and I don't want to do that. The last variation is mixed member proportional, which is what's used in Germany and New Zealand. And New Zealand adopted this in 1994. They use a combination of single member districts, and you vote for your individual in the district, and then you also get a second vote for a party, and your second vote for the party is tabulated regionally. So that allows you to split your vote. It allows you to vote for a particular candidate that you like in your district, and you can vote for a different party if you want to. And that party then gets what are called additional member seats or leveling seats. The best systems use around 20 to 30% leveling seats. And those leveling seats take the difference between who gets elected in those single member districts and the party vote, and it allocates that a pool of seats for parties to level everything up so that your votes for the party equal how many seats are allocated in the parliament. So I came up with my own system, which combines all of these, and it gives voters the choice. I'm calling it hybrid proportional representation. If you do a search for hybrid proportional representation, it will bring you to the best democracy page for it. Basically, it combines all four of those systems, and it gives people a choice which system they want to use. They get 2 votes, one for the candidate in their district, one for the party vote, and the candidate, the district votes use single transferable vote. So the districts are all proportional, and then the leveling seats at the regional level are also proportional. So it's incredibly accurate. I think it, if it's ever implemented, hopefully when it's implemented, with a 3% threshold, I believe that we can get accuracy to within 1%, so that there's going to be tremendous accuracy and fairness in the system. Everybody gets represented, very few wasted votes, and almost everybody I pitch it to likes it. I'll give an example quick. I've gotten 2 Democratic Party candidates in Southern Colorado in rural Republican districts who are going to be incorporating it into their platform. I sold them on the idea. Basically, you ask people one question: would you rather be included or excluded in representation? Everybody who votes wants their vote to count, and they want to be included. So you've already got agreement that people want to be included. Under our current system, a large portion of the voters are excluded and their votes are wasted. And under the system I've designed, almost everybody is included and everybody gets accurate representation. And there are very few wasted votes.
So I'll add, Jesse's doing a state-by-state initiative on that website. You can see, you can sign up to be a admin for one of the state groups, right, Jesse?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's great, Jesse. And to add to what you were saying about, people feel like their vote counts, that's the opposite of what we have in the United States. And that's the prime reason why we have such poor voter turnout. One of the worst of all democracies, are the worst of all democracies in the world. And then in 2020, we had mega turnout, like one of the greatest turnouts in the United States in a long time. And since then, there's all these states, Republican led, that are working out various ways to suppress the vote. And so all it just leads is more apathy, more cynicism, more jadedness, like, who cares? My vote doesn't count. And then the people, the demagogues feed into that energy and say, yeah, it's those people who are screwing you over. And, that's where you get such a large number of people who fall prey to the demagogues. Jesse?
So with plurality systems, turnout, voter engagement tends to be relatively low. And in proportional systems, it tends to be between, most countries, 75 to 80% or so. Some countries have up to 90%. So I want to give one more example on single transferable vote. The Australian Senate uses single transferable vote. And they had an election, a special election where they were doing a changeover on systems. And they had 12 people up for election for the Australian Senate in 2016. And for those 12 seats, they had 38 parties running, plus another 18 independents. So with this system, everybody, you make ballot access very easy. Everybody has a choice and their votes aren't wasted. You can vote for the most fringe people that you want and your vote will still count because you're ranking your vote. If your first choice doesn't get in, then it kicks down to your second choice and then your third choice. And voter intent is retained throughout the counting process. It's an incredibly good system. And when I presented this once to the local libertarian lunch group, I don't agree with much of what they believe in, but they're a minority. They don't have representation for the most part. And I explained, I did my pitch and showed how they could benefit from this. 14 of 14 libertarians voted for proportional representation afterwards because they understood that their votes wouldn't be wasted and they would actually count toward the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So when people understand how the system works and that 94 other countries are using it, that's something. It's hardly ever publicized in the United States. Most people don't know about it. You say proportional representation to people and their eyes get crossed and they're befuddled. And you explain to them that we're using a system designed, this is where I lose people. I say it was designed by slavers to retain slavery, to protect slavery. And then 10 of the first 12 presidents were slavers. And we persisted in slavery for 93 years after it was abolished in England in 1772. Almost nobody has heard of Somerset versus Stuart, which was the court case in 1772 that abolished slavery in England. They don't teach it in American schools. That's the reason why the United States revolted from England, is they were going to lose their slaves. And they devised a system to retain slavery, and it's been very effective. And our values have changed, and we've made the political system more inclusive, but we haven't changed the system that the slavers set up. And so we can't achieve the real diversity of who lives in this country because the system is designed to concentrate power and exclude people. So I say this system, proportional representation, is designed to disperse power and include everyone. So,
Yeah, right on. Does anyone else want to add anything or
I kind of took this over, sorry.
No, that's okay. If anyone, if you do, feel free to speak. Just have to take your mute off, the mute button.
Can I speak?
Yeah, Michael.
Okay, thank you. I really love what people are saying. My question is that it seems, Michael, you're one of the leaders of this discussion. John and Jesse doing an unbelievable job in describing what you have done a lot of work in. My question to you is, where would a peaceful demonstration come in to the energies that you are putting forth here? Has Jesse ever led a political demonstration? Michael, I don't know if you have. Has John ever led a political demonstration? It does seem to me that during very tough times in this country, we've had demonstrations. We had demonstrations during the Vietnam War. Did they bring an end to the Vietnam War? I don't know. Maybe they did. But it seems that, yes, I even was listening to Jay-Z today, and he was saying that the system is broken and we need to change the system. So how did these countries, how did the Netherlands, how did all of these progressive countries come to be where they had better constitutions? And did it take a political demonstration in Denmark, in Sweden, in all of the countries that seem to have it right? Where, my question to you three people that have been leading this discussion, where does a political demonstration in Washington, D.C. fit in with what you're talking about?
I'll lead, Michael, because I actually, this is something I'm actually going to be organizing.
Good.
But I'll start by saying researchers at Harvard, and I don't know how long ago, not that long ago, came up with what's called the 3.5% rule. And what that is that whenever 3.5%, what they found, whenever 3.5% of a population gets involved in a social movement, in a nonviolent social movement, change has occurred. Sometimes it's not easy, but change will occur. And that's the researchers at Harvard have said. So that's that in the United States, that would be about 11 million people. And there's 11 million people who and more who would agree with us if educated. Will they join a movement? Well, hard to say. I recently was contacted by someone else, a friend, and we've been talking, and we're going to organize the first of what we hope to be more protest rallies. We're calling it the Pitchfork March. We're going to do it locally in my area, the Capital Region, New York, on September 11th in Albany, New York, near the state capitol. For anyone else who lives nearby and wants to join, we've been writing up material on it, and we talked about the ideas of direct democracy. We like the term, the idea. There's an economist, a venture capitalist economist, Nick Hanauer, who has a podcast called Pitchfork Economics, and he gave it that name because in 2014 he wrote an article, because he's actually a very wealthy, a billionaire perhaps, but he wrote an article called "The Pitchforks Are Coming for Us," and meaning the plutocrats. And it was an article in Politico, but it was an open letter to his fellow plutocrats saying, if we don't address wealth inequality, the pitchforks are going to come for us. So he wrote that. He has his Pitchfork Economics. That's where we thought that's a good phrase. So that's my contribution. We hope that it will go something bigger. And one other thing, and then your question about other countries, Denmark, maybe Jesse might or John might know, but I'll add one other thing. In Taiwan, a few years back, not too long ago, they had a very major change in governance, all because of a protest movement called the Sunflower Movement. It happened pretty quickly. It started in 2014 when the Taiwanese government, in secret, formed a trade agreement with mainland China, and people were upset. It was basically started with a youth movement, and then at one point there was a protest rally outside the legislature of close to 500,000 Taiwanese, and the government listened, and they restructured their government. I'm not sure if they rewrote the constitution, but restructured it, and they formed what's called virtual Taiwan, and they made the government more open, somewhat of a direct democracy, an open democracy, and they named a minister of digital democracy, and so they have a way of now getting the public involved in this radical open government experiment that's still going on, v Taiwan. And so people can communicate with each other. There's all various software tools. There's one tool called that's an American design, Polis, and POLIS. You'd have to just, which is a software program where in this open governance, direct digital democracy. So this protest movement led to major changes in Taiwan. So I don't know if either John or Jesse have any other knowledge of protest movements that led to Denmark's forms of governance or these other much more reformed democracies that are working.
Yeah, well, real quickly, Michael, I can say a few things about that. You have the pots and pans revolution in Iceland, and talked to those folks, Hodor Torfason and others that were involved in that. They went down to the Althingi with pots and pans and banged until they drove the people out of the parliament there. It's called the Althingi.
2009 or 10, 11.
Yeah, 2008 was the meltdown, and then
Yeah.
and then they drafted a new constitution. It was crowdsourced, and they made a couple of significant errors. One of them is sort of could have been, well, they both could have been avoided. One was that they just opted for an electoral system that was very complicated and had never been tried before. And then they took the constitution to the Althingi for approval, which was totally wrong. They should have had a national referendum and decided about it as as citizens themselves. It doesn't. It's not up to the legislature to ratify a constitution. That's something that citizens need to organize to do. But constitutions come around in a lot of different ways. A couple of good examples would be Germany, 1949, and South Africa. I think that was 1969, if I'm not mistaken. And there are different circumstances. Obviously, Germany was coming out of a war, but the United States, the Allies went to Germany and they said, you guys need a democratic constitution. And they basically said, sit down at a table and figure it out. And they did. And then I think it was 10 years later, 1959, some scholars from the United States went back to Germany to assess how the new constitution was doing. And our legal scholars, ones from the United States, said that basically the German system was better than ours. But it went under the radar. Nobody stopped to think about what that meant, and it's again a tribute to how permanent our Constitution has become. It's just people are just blindsided by it. So but your question about demonstrations, to me, and I've always been part of movements and demonstrations in my past, and I've come to realize that I don't think that's exactly the approach. It's always it's like we're coming at you and we demand things, we demand change, we want this, we want that. But I think a more productive way to look at it, in my view, is to say, the government doesn't have the power, we have the power. And to be very clear about that, that means that we're going to be in control of the government. So I think rather than a demonstration, I think a peaceful assembly to draft a modern constitution for the United States should be the goal. I don't particularly find demonstrations effective or interesting anymore. You might think that's a way of getting people to get out and do something, and it may be true that people will learn and things will happen as a result. But meanwhile, the focus on organizing a convention and figuring out a way to make that happen is avoided. And to your point, the last person I interviewed, George Van Cleve, he has a blueprint for how to do that. So if you want to learn about how to organize the country to write a new constitution, I think his proposal by and large makes an enormous amount of sense. It's very practical and very, very well thought out. And that would be the demonstration of all times. That would be the demonstration I'd want to participate in.
My turn, I guess. So Norway adopted proportional representation through basically a lower class uh, uh, mass movement organized by labor, because there was the same type of economic divisions that we have an oligarchy, and basically I like using feudal terms, the oligarchy and peasants. Is if you don't have power, you're not part of the oligarchy. So they little side on Germany. The German system was designed by Austin Albu, ALBU, in 1946. He was a British diplomat, and they did it. So Germany had been divided into 4 sectors, and he did it for the British sector, and then it got adopted by the other 2 sectors. So that was he designed the mixed member proportional system. It's attributed to one day in February of 1946. One of the state senators I'm friends with in Colorado made a comparison on change between, he made a metaphor with lifting appliances. That if you go and you try to pick up a refrigerator, it's pretty difficult. But if you go to pick up a toaster oven, it's relatively easy. So basically the concept being that the lighter in the lift, the smaller the lift, the easier it is to pull off. And that most change has occurred at the local and state level, and then been adopted at the federal level later. So that's true for women's right to vote, and adoption of marijuana recently in the last 20 years, and gay marriage. All these things start at the state and local level. So to that end, I've been working on developing a little network of people that will hopefully disseminate these ideas and attempt them at the local level. And I'm very happy because in the last week, I've drafted these 2 Democratic Party candidates, and they're going to be pitching this to their potential constituents. They're both in Republican districts, and the sell is that everybody gets represented. And the deciding factor are the people who are in the middle, the unaffiliated voters. And if you can win 10 to 15% of that vote, then you can get elected. And that's what I'm hoping, is that if this happens, if this is successful, where 2 Democrats can capture Republican seats using proportional representation as a compelling advantage why people should vote for them, then I'm hoping that that becomes the prototype for getting other people in any party to adopt proportional representation as part of their platform. So my belief is the best way is to educate people about this solution. I get really good response on it once you get their attention, and you reach people, and that demonstrations are good because they bring people together, and they give them a sense of common cause. So it has a role to play, and I personally don't like going out to demonstrations that much. I'm not too big on crowds and being in crowds, but I think it has a pretty valuable role. And I've been thinking about doing some myself, that, trying to organize some. What we're doing is I do Zoom presentations and try to educate people by doing that. And it's basically a question of how do you reach people and how do you get their attention, and so that you can give them your pitch, whatever it is that you're trying to sell. And democracy is a process question, and a lot of people are. It's not top of the mind that you have to deal with the process. They're more interested in particular issues like assault weapons or abortion or education issues or environment, climate change. So I bring that into the group as a way of saying that all these different problems are not being addressed. And that's because you're not properly represented. The only way we get representation so our interests can be addressed is through a system that's designed to represent everyone. That's the gist of it.
Yeah, that's great, Jesse. We're getting to an hour and a half. Anyone else? Jane? You'll have to,
So Jesse mentioned that you're doing Zoom calls. How about teach-ins? Like go to churches, go to local Democratic parties. I learned a lot on this call tonight. I did not know, the finer points of representational, what did you call it? Proportional representation. I think if people are educated about it, it would be an easy sell. But I think you need to get out there. And I actually think the African-American community is a place to go.
I agree.
Stacey Abrams and her organizing. When those are people who have been chronically, historically underrepresented, and they will, if you can give examples of what the benefits are to people in other countries and how that could transfer to benefits here, I think people would be all over it. Anyway.
Susan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Jesse, what you said really resonated with me. I do public relations for a living, and I'm actually working with Michael on promoting his book. And one of the things that I found that's pretty difficult is that people do want to concentrate on the issues, especially the media. They want to talk about climate change, Roe v. Wade, like the specific issues. But when you get to the part about changing the process, I feel like either they think it's just so big, like how can we possibly like cover a story on this? Or we don't want to go that direction. We want to talk about these specific issues. So I think you bring up a really good point about that. And it's about how do we get people to that conversation, maybe through the issues, to talk about process and really changing things up. And I think people feel sort of helpless at the end of the day. One of the things that I felt reading Michael's book is that the first part was a real reflection of what's going on, and made me feel really sad. But then the second part gave me hope of change that can happen. But I actually felt like, wow, there could be like a third part that's a workbook about like, what can we be doing? Like, what are some things? And that's like what the end of this call has really been about. Like, okay, so, what do we think rallies are a good idea? Do we think, doing webinars and things like that? I mean, I believe all sorts of education is necessary, and just putting out, key message points will resonate with different groups of people. But I think it's a really interesting discussion because we can't be the only people that are thinking along these lines. There's got to be a lot more that, we can join forces with to then get the word out even more.
Yeah. Thank you. See, I agree with you. It's really like an all of the above approach, and we're really want to get to the point where, you know, everything we're saying is just, we have a government, in the famous words of Abraham Lincoln, of the people, by the people, for the people. You know, not James Madison had this delusion of tyranny of the majority, but it's really a plurality of the majority. And that's what we're seeing other countries going towards. So why not here? Yeah.
I can't find statistics on this because I don't think they exist. I believe that over 80% of US elections are predetermined for one party or the other. And the closest you get to proving that is at the Cook Political Report, where they predict which party is going to take which state and Senate seat and House district and all of that. So on my last ballot, I voted in the primary in my county, and 11 of the 13 seats that were up for election were uncontested seats in a one-party county. So as soon as the party picks the primary seats, the election's pretty much over. And that's true. Two professors at Colorado College did a study in 2018, and of the 64 Colorado counties, 53 of them were one-party dominant counties. That's the technical term for it. One-party dominant is when one party wins every seat in every election, and that's with the plurality system. So proportional representation would blow that up. And of course, the two cartel parties aren't interested in that. So they're doing the best to suppress me and my group. We're trying our different workarounds to doing that. But also the media is in cahoots with the cartel. It's because they all answer to the same owners. So it's probably a multi-generational effort, like women's right to vote. And I think it's, when you present this to people, everybody understands the beauty of it, and that they're going to end up with representation that's a fair and accurate system. But you have to prototype it so that people have a tangible system to look at that you can use as an example. So that's what I'm working on. I want to try to find some place where we can implement this. I've been working in Colorado, but it may not be the best state. It could be New York, or it could be California. And we prototype systems that we can then point to as saying, well, this is how it works. And then it becomes tangible. So that would be, that's what I've been working on.
Yeah. I put my email in the box for those who don't have it. Jesse, perhaps you can write it down. I don't know if you're on my email list, but yeah, I'd like to be in touch, Jesse. So feel free to email me, just m2@mac.com. Yeah, and you know, just talk that term, and we'll probably start winding down here, but that term cartel is really power, just is all about the money that accrues to it. And in the United States, with such a corrupt system of dark money, dirty money and dark money, there's just so much money that accrues to both parties, and especially the party in power. And it's you know, just that's a whole nother part of this whole conversation. So I did this. I'm just gonna, I think, time to wind down here. Thanks everybody for sticking out. I think we only lost one person, and an hour and a half of Zooming is a lot. But the only way we could do it, since we're not all in the same area. I think a lot of great ideas tonight. I did this last month And, I was thinking a monthly basis. I'll see about doing it somewhere towards the end of August, even though a lot of people start going on vacation. Maybe we'll do it anyway. And if it's just me talking to myself, do that. Then in mid to late September, I'll be away, but continue. And if it's whatever comes of it, it's just discussions on a monthly basis, whatever basis, or if it's some sort of movement, or just all inspiring each other for all the work we're doing, or just the ability to just realize there are better ways, and the United States is the outlier among all the democracies of the world. Yeah, so I'm glad. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. And I appreciate everyone comments and just listening, whether you commented or listened, adding your ideas, your wisdom, and that's what we want. This is bigger than any one person, and that's why I was saying it's an all of the above point. And so whatever way we do it, let's keep going. So I'm gonna call it a night. I think we could keep going for a while more. It's really much appreciated. Thank you all. If anyone wants to record, I'm not sure if I'll send it out to the whole list or what, but I did make a recording of tonight, and put some, I put my email in there, and Jesse put his email in there. So yeah, I'll be in touch, Jesse. Let me just write it down before
I just do a copy and paste on the whole chat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Anyone, you can copy and paste the whole chat if you want. In the lower.
I'll give you my email address if anybody wants to contact me. Just leave something in the subject line so I recognize it. There you go.
And John, I must have your email address, right?
Yeah, I just sent it to you.
Yeah, but you're on my email list, right?
You are. I am.
Okay. Yeah.
I am.
Oh, good. Okay. Well,
Cool.
thanks everyone. This is really enlightening, and like I said, it's all hands on deck and all of the above. One of the above, doesn't matter. But yeah, visualize it, create it. Yeah, because we want hope, not despair. So
Yeah.
till next
Thanks,
time,
Michael.
thanks everyone.
All right.
We'll
Checking
be
out.
talking again. Peace out, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Till next.